When I was a child, still a baby practically, my mother told me that she was entering the gate of our house with me and my sister, we're twins. A very old lady suddenly appears and asks to have a look at the babies. My mother lets the lady see the children, and she is surprised to see twins and says, "Oh, what a lovely pair of twins. Too bad one of them won't make it, right?" My mother says she went crazy on the woman, cursed at her, and sent her away. She told me it must have been a common thought for older people. Perhaps in the past, it used to happen more frequently that one of the twins would pass away as a baby or something like that. Time passed, and no one died. The thing is, a few years later, I must have been around 9 or 10 years old, and we already lived in another house, by the way. I believe it was a Saturday because I was in the backyard playing soccer alone, waiting for lunch to be ready. It was almost noon. My mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch when the same old lady appears in the kitchen. You can imagine the huge shock my mother had. She was practically speechless. The creepy old lady then says, "So, the two babies really made it, huh? That's something." And without saying another word, the old lady leaves the kitchen, takes the external corridor leading to the backyard, passes by me playing soccer, opens the gate to the street, and leaves. My mother comes rushing towards me saying, "Why did you let this woman in the house to talk to me and didn't tell me anything?" I simply said she didn't pass by me at the entrance. The thing is, to reach the kitchen of this house, one had to enter through the gate, pass through the backyard, and then there were two paths, one through the external corridor and the other passing through the rooms of the house. Either way, she had to have passed by me at the entrance, which I swear didn't happen, or else I would have certainly seen her. Well, we're fine, never saw that old lady again. I still remember when my mother told me this story and the shock she had when she found that old lady standing in the kitchen of our house staring at her. I spent my childhood on a farm, and something interesting about rural residents, especially in the pre-electricity era, which was my case, is how they deal with the supernatural. The general idea is not to panic and pretend you didn't see anything. A certain conscious blindness, so as not to panic too much. In my childhood, I witnessed some interesting things that I don't like to talk about much, but one that I found the most intriguing was about the neighbor's dog. A neighbor had a huge, black, furry dog. It looked like a wolf, and true to the people's originality, his name was Lobo. But he was a big sweetheart, loved to play, and had tremendous patience with us. He was free to roam around everyone's farms and was welcomed everywhere. Once I came home from school and my parents had gone out. They left a note for me to stay at a friend's farm and they would pick me up when they returned. The dog was there and we played with him until nightfall. In the countryside, without moonlight and electricity, it gets pitch dark. So we stayed in the house area, under the light of a kerosene lamp, while my friend's mother prepared dinner. I don't exactly remember who noticed it first, but at the edge of the lamplight, emerging from a nearby bamboo grove, we saw the neighbor's dog. I remember the fear I felt because he looked different. Keep in mind it was dark, and he was black, so we couldn't see clearly. But he seemed larger and with a somewhat unnatural shape, as if his hind legs were bigger than the front ones, leaving him somewhat hunched. He approached very slowly, and in our fear, my friend called out to his mother, "Lobo is coming towards us," to which the mother responded, "Get inside now." We rushed inside, and she locked the door. Lobo was in a corner of the house, huddled and whimpering. I have hundreds of stories from my father about paranormal encounters he's had. He has 2 of them concerning what I believe to be skinwalkers. Both of these take place in the Southeast during the late 80s or 90s. Excuse my writing because I'm not a writer. To begin with, my dad is Native American and spent a lot of his childhood and early adulthood. The first one, my dad was walking around in the woods of a reservation with his friends. His friends were back at the car. He was walking about 50 feet away from them. He saw another native man behind a bush, but he could immediately feel something was wrong with him. The guy had on no clothing as far as he could see, no jewelry or makeup or anything distinguishing. His hair was pulled back into a ponytail. They held eye contact for a long time. What felt like hours was in reality probably less than a minute and a half. He was temporarily frozen with fear. He called for his friends, but none came. He turned to face them. Then he looked back and the man was gone. Within seconds, noiselessly, no sign there was anyone there at all. The second is definitely a lot closer to what most people think of when they hear about skinwalkers. My dad was out in a secluded forest when he heard a piercing scream very close by. He described it as a mix of a native throat cry, the ay-ay-ay-ay sound, sort of sound mixed with that of a feral cat or hurt bird. They brushed it off this first time, then they heard it a second time. It was just as close as it had been then, despite them moving. They decided to get out of there. It was defeating and about 10 seconds long. It happened about 3 times as they were leaving, never once sounding any farther or closer away. Some backstory. My best friend growing up could touch and heal people with some damage to himself. It's been 20 years, we're both 33 now, and he's learned to do it so well, no touch is needed, and he receives no damage unless he has to restore to 100%, so he won't. A few of our school friends did odd things, knew things, had dreams, etc. as well, but I've never met another healer until my wife. All but my best friend are gone, most by suicides or accidents, so my wife only got to meet my friend and hasn't learned to that level yet. My wife and I also have altars, tulpas, insert name here, and one of theirs is the healer. The healer is young here on earth and young in this body since my wife's 20, but his energy is ancient. I can and do take some of my wife's altars if the altars allow, especially the healer, as one of my altars are married to them. My altar is young and holds my last shred of innocence. She's seen hell and back, and she's a warrior because of it, but I and all my and my wife's altars protect her. Healer is closest in age to her, and naturally they become friends, then lovers. A night ago I had hip popping, semi-uncommon in myself. I have many disabilities I have to cover, plus the pain sent me to the ER, where I also had seizures, very common for me. I had to get 4 needles before they found a viable vein, and that pain added to the seizures, added to the hip pain, on and on. I basically don't feel pain since all I've ever felt was pain, but my altar has been destroyed enough, so I told my wife have him take her. Healer's the only one who can, to stop her pain and TBH to let me go. Well, my wife agreed, and when all the staff was gone, they placed their hands on my chest and shocked me while ripping my altar from me. Shocks are normal, they do it in excitement sometimes, but this was amazingly hard, draining for us both. I didn't die, obviously, but rending that last piece of me in half hurt in such odd ways. I was adult and human and boring, and very, very alone. Now we're back home, I'm doing what I can to teach them despite not having healing myself, and we're letting my altar kinda go wild. It's okay, as it can or will be. We'd like to be asked anything. We'll answer what slashes we can, and please let's discuss y'all's experiences too.